To the people saying that there are more islands just like Epstein's, you're right. Imagine being flown into this private, really remote island as a young child under the notion that they were going to help you read, counsel you, and provide the best fitness classes. Except once you're there, away from anyone you've ever known, they sexually abuse you over and over again. And there's no way to escape because you're on a literal island, and then you find that it's not just you. There are hundreds of little kids, specifically little boys, being SA'd and filmed there. Sound familiar? And no, I'm not talking about Epstein's Island, because long before Jeffrey, there was this guy, Francis Sheldon. He owned North Fox Island, a nearly 900-acre secluded island where some of the worst and most disturbing things ever took place. Everyone is now understanding what really happened on Epstein's Island thanks to the horrifying new document drops. But not many people know about the horrors that took place on North Fox Island, and this involves some of the most prominent and wealthy businessmen in Michigan and the surrounding areas, or the fact that the Oakland County child killer likely has ties to this island. So let's talk about it. Like I said, this is North Fox Island and its owner, Francis Sheldon. Francis and his brother bought the island in 1960 for $20,000. What kind of kickstarted the illegal and deeply disturbing behavior here was the fact that Francis was a big brother. He was a part of the Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America program, which is a nonprofit organization where adult volunteers are matched with children between the ages of 5 and 18. These children often come from troubled backgrounds, so these adults would act as a mentor to them. Francis would fly out these young boys that he would mentor in the program to his island, where he would then do unspeakable things to them. But he would advertise it as a special island retreat. Digging more into Francis so you have a good idea of who he was and how much power he held, he was a former airman in the Air National Guard. He was also a private investor who attended Yale University. So he was incredibly smart and had a lot of powerful connections. But what most of us didn't know that weren't a part of the elites was that Francis was described as an executive of the CP trade in Detroit in the 1960s and 70s. Like, he was one of the biggest producers and distributors of CP in the area, which is disgusting. Like I said, he had some very powerful connections, and one of those connections was this man right here, Gerald Richards. I know you're probably saying, Courtney, just get to the part about the island, but it is important that you know the people involved because of what their occupations and hobbies were. So Gerald was a PE teacher at St. Joseph's Catholic School in Port Huron, Michigan. Long before he ever met Francis, he was a child predator. He once got in trouble and was charged with child molestation for groping his young male students. He was caught holding their private areas, but he said it was to measure them for a jockstrap. And this is concerning for a lot of reasons, but also because he was able to hide who he was really well. When all of this was going on, he was married and had a young child himself. He described himself as a master magician and would perform free of charge at schools and churches. And he came from a well-respected family. His own dad was a police officer, so he was virtually untouchable. Gerald eventually got into and made contacts within the CP industry while working for an adult bookstore. During his time there, he learned how, in his words, profitable it was. So he left and he created his own mail-order CP business. He would recruit hundreds of young boys with troubled backgrounds and would film, produce, and sell the abuse they suffered. He had over 600 customers, which included well-known and prominent businessmen, and they all said they preferred the youngest boys that Gerald could offer. Fast forward to 1974, and this is when Gerald and Francis officially meet. They would begin traveling together and finding young boys in various ways, usually through creepy motel owners. Francis introduced Gerald to North Fox Island, and then 1 year later, in 1975, they created this fake organization called Brother Paul's Children's Mission, and together they advertised it as a charity that provided services to young children with reading problems. They said they would teach them how to read, counsel them emotionally, and provide classes in physical fitness. On the outside looking in, it seemed like this great opportunity / self-improvement group specifically for troubled boys. It was tax exempt, and all parents had to do was pay an $85 fee for their child's 6-day stay on North Fox Island. Hundreds of young boys would then be flown out by Francis's private plane to the island, and once there, away from anyone they've ever known, and now with no way to escape, then they would be filmed performing sex acts on camera, on themselves, on other adults, and they were even forced to do disturbing things to the other boys, all while being filmed. And just when you think it couldn't get any more disturbing, it does. So Francis and Gerald had a CP publication, which, like I mentioned, involved some pretty high up people with money and power. But the two men would then invite their wealthiest customers and subscribers of the publication to the island, where they would repeatedly SA these boys. What's incredibly terrifying is the fact that Francis was trying to establish the mission/charity as a child welfare agency, so that the states and federal government would subsidize them. So all while these little boys were thought to be receiving the help and guidance of a lifetime, in reality, the island and this fake mission was a CP ring operating on North Fox Island, where hundreds of little boys were traumatized. There were two other main men involved, along with Francis and Gerald. The first was Dyer Grossman, a New York millionaire and science teacher at a prestigious all-boys boarding school. Dyer was listed as the vice president of the mission and was very close with Francis and Gerald. The other man involved was named Adam Starchild. Adam was a white-collar criminal and was also very active within the Big Brother organization. He alone took so many kids to North Fox Island, where I'm sure they were all abused as well. Adam was listed as the president of the Church of the New Revelation, which was the mission's parent company. So the mission had all of these connected companies/branches, and I'm sure they were all in on this horrifying situation. So for years, they were doing this going completely undetected. But in July of 1976, it all came crashing down. This is when Gerald Richards was officially arrested. There was a huge investigation carried out by Michigan State Police, and they found some pretty disturbing things. For one, they found a large quantity of CP in his car and office, and they also literally found stamped envelopes which also included CP that were about to be mailed out. Going through all of his things though, they found lists of names and customers, and contacts to other big figures within the industry like Francis Sheldon, Adam Starchild, and Dyer Grossman. So Gerald was quickly arrested for criminal sexual conduct, and as part of his plea deal, he gave up a ton of information and specifically mentioned Francis and Dyer by name. He spilled everything, what was really happening on North Fox Island and all the nasty things they did together. 3 days later, authorities raided Francis's home. But since days had passed, he was nowhere to be found, and all of his drawers and cabinets had been emptied. For some reason, even though they had more than enough evidence, it took months for police to get an arrest warrant for Francis. But by that point, he had already fled the country. No one knew it at the time, but he had fled to the Netherlands. I guess at the time this happened, the Netherlands and the US didn't share an extradition treaty. Dyer was next in line to be arrested, but unfortunately, he was tipped off about Gerald's arrest, and he too fled. It's assumed he fled to California, and both he and Francis were declared fugitives. The FBI were brought in to help locate them, but as of today, Dyer has never been found. He seemingly disappeared into thin air. Francis ended up mysteriously dying in Amsterdam in 1996. And it's crazy, but he actually kept in touch with Adam Starchild, who would often secretly give him money to live. Adam eventually died in 2006, and he was never formally charged because there was never enough evidence to prove his connection. So 3 out of the 4 men involved were either never found or never charged. But that just leaves one person. Gerald. Gerald was sentenced to only 2 to 20 years in prison, and during his time there, he was severely tortured by the other inmates. He was released sometime later, but he was arrested once again in 1988 on, you guessed it, CP charges. They let him out and he did it again. It's a tale as old as time. Gerald ended up dying in 1994, and I'm sure he's looking up at us now. What's super crazy is that after Gerald was arrested the first time, a roll of undeveloped film was sent from a man in California to Gerald, which was then intercepted by police. But the film was found to be sent by this man, Claudius Vermillies. Claudius owned a very similar operation to North Fox Island, but he called it the Boys Farm. The Boys Farm was located in Tennessee, and he advertised this as a self-improvement farm where he, as a priest, would help young troubled boys. But again, once there, he would photograph horrible things being done to these boys. So once police developed the film that he sent to Gerald, they found that it was a bunch of CP. So it's just crazy that there are so many fronts and organizations all over the world that are somehow connected like this, and how many were exposed after Gerald's arrest. I wish I could say I was done, but sadly, I am not. Police believe that the crimes that that took place on North Fox Island have ties to the Oakland County child killer case. The Oakland County child killer is the name given to the perpetrator responsible for the serial killings of at least 4 children in Oakland County, Michigan, between 1976 and 1977. So these young kids, all from the same county, were killed by either strangulation or, in one case, shooting them in the face. The person who did this has never been identified, but what continues to haunt the police and pretty much everyone who knows about this case is what the killer did to these kids before they died. The killer would keep these kids alive for anywhere between 3 days and 3 weeks, bathing them, feeding them, and washing their clothes before he killed them. So this was right around the same time that the horrible things were taking place on North Fox Island. And one of the only suspects in the child killer case is Christopher Bush. And can you guess where he liked to go? Yep. North Fox Island. Christopher was a known client of the Brother Paul's mission, and although there has never been any physical proof tying him to the Oakland County child killings, police strongly believe that the killer, whoever it may be, likely victimized the children on North Fox Island. If you want, I can make a separate video going more into detail about the Oakland County child killings and Christopher, so just let me know in the comments. But it's just crazy that that crime is still unsolved, especially with how brutal it was. It's scary that whoever did that is still out there. And it's terrifying to think that there are so many islands, just like Epstein's, that could all be connected. They just don't want you to know it.